Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Art of SBA Lending. This episode we have today is one of my favorite episodes to do. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a top producing BDO on the podcast. And he's not new to this top producer stuff either. He's been a top producer for a decade plus. Now, what makes a top producer? How do you scale your production? What type of sacrifices do you have to make to put up these types of numbers? These are the questions that we discussed and more. So without further ado, here is my talk with Senior BDO at First Internet Bank, Jared Johnson. I saw your name because you were a BDO of the Year 2022 Coleman. So congratulations, by the way, on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I actually got back last night from the meeting that they do with the awards.
Oh, you went to the thing? Where was it?
I was at the Arizona Biltmore in Phoenix.
Oh.
So yeah, if you haven't been there, that place is really cool. I wish I could have been there longer, but I don't even think I was there like a full 24 hours.
So did they bring in all the folks that won down there, right? Was it a big group?
Yeah, it was supposed to be a big group, but then a couple of the guys ended up getting COVID and couldn't come. So ended up being more of a smaller group, but it was still a really good time.
Yeah, that's better sometimes. Yeah, I'm sure you guys are all just sitting there drinking champagne, as top producers in the industry, just laughing at all the peasants that can't produce.
I wish. It's more like we're sitting there freaking out because we can't be on our email all day.
Dude, it's a problem. Are you like that? Are you just email 24/7?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty crazy. So I took 2 days off last week for the first time in a really long time, but it was my birthday and I had 20 people. We went to Nashville for my birthday and I got back Sunday night. And then Monday morning, I went on the computer for the first time in a while. And I have an assistant, and she was handling as much as she could. And I still had like 230 something emails that I needed to get to. And then I had to leave by like 9 a.m. to go to Kansas City for a broker event. Came back on Tuesday morning, worked the rest of the day, which was nice. Then Wednesday, I flew to Phoenix, came back last night. So it's been a little bit of a wild week trying to keep up with everybody. But yeah, my email just goes crazy. I feel like half the time I'm checking them and then I can't even keep up with it. Like every time I check one or clear one out, I'm getting another one at the same time. It's just out of control. But I'd rather be busy than not. So.
Well, you say that too, and everyone says that. However, burnout's also a real thing. And I look at your history and it's almost like you were born a top producer, and that catches up with you. I mean, are you having fun doing this, or is it just super stressful?
I mean, there's definitely days where it's stressful, like I'll say the week before, I think I'd been out a couple days before that. I do a lot of trying to meet with brokers and attend their meetings or conferences, all of that. I feel like I do a lot better when I can get in person with someone and sit and talk with them. But then obviously what comes with that is it's really hard to juggle the deals you're working on. So, there's definitely times where I'll roll out of bed and start working at 5:30 in the morning and literally will not stop until midnight. Other than to maybe eat lunch, I'll try really hard to get my kids ready for bed and spend an hour with them at least. So I'm not that dad that's never around. But yeah, man, there's so many times where you got to work a lot, but I don't know. I feel like anytime that I start to get a little burned out or I get, a little tired of it, something great happens. I get that borrower calling me crying because they're so happy that we, got their business done, or a seller calling me, telling me, hey, we've been trying to sell this business for a long time and I'm so happy you're able to do it for me. And then of course it helps, when you get those paychecks too. So that always makes it a little nicer. But yeah, there's definitely been times where I've been a little burned out and been a little tired from it, but it seems like as soon as I start to get there, then something great happens and I can jump right back into it.
I've been there, trust me. But life is so short. It's like it flies by. You mentioned you have an assistant. What other help do you have? Because I always am, or recently more so, kind of interested in figuring out how to scale a business like ours, where we're a BDO and we are our business. And if you want to go to the next level, you kind of need help. So what's your kind of circle look like?
Yeah, so I've got an assistant. Primarily, what she'll do is kind of track down items that I need from borrowers, put together a folder for me. I'm starting to work with her more on learning how to do the spreads. So then that way, you're making sure that while you're collecting items, you're not wasting anyone's time. And so trying to get her to do that and then kind of really put the file together. I will usually go in after and kind of make sure it's a deal that we can do, see if there's questions, all that kind of stuff before we submit it to underwriting. We've got great underwriters, great closers. We do have what they call BDAs or business development assistants that will kind of work on the file on the front end and then kind of work through anything else that we need throughout the file. But you're right. I feel like there's like a certain level, and depending also on what type of deals you're doing, right? If you're doing a lot of big real estate transactions, doing 50, 60, 70 millions, not that hard compared to somebody doing 50, 60 million in BizAc, where, those deals are 3 times as much work. And it's really difficult. I don't feel like you can break through that ceiling of like 60 million without having quite a few people helping you out. So I'm always trying to look at that as well and kind of see what can I do to be able to get to that point where I'm not feeling, stressed out all the time to where I can't, also give enough attention to each deal, because I feel like it's a little bit of give and take. If I'm traveling around trying to bring in more deals with the brokers, but then the borrowers are getting frustrated because they're like, hey, I've talked to you one time on the entire deal, then it's like, okay, so how do I how do I juggle all of this, and how do you keep everybody happy at the same time? It's definitely a juggling act. And then you kind of wonder, okay, is there a threshold that you're okay with? And then kind of want to just say, that's a sweet spot for me. I need to stay in that world so that I'm not, losing contact with my referral sources or losing contacts with my borrowers. Are my underwriters still okay with me? All that kind of stuff. It's almost impossible, I feel, to kind of find that sweet spot. But then also, people like us, we don't want to stop. I mean, I was doing a presentation last week at the Texas Association of Business Brokers conference, and somebody said something like, what do you do as far as volume? I said, yeah, I should do at least like 55 million this year, all 7A. And the guy kind of laughed and said, that's more than some banks. And I said, no, it's more than a lot of banks. And he said, well, how high do you want to go? I said, if I got to 100 million, I'd probably be happy for about 20 minutes. And then I'd say, okay, what's next? And everybody kind of laughed. But then like walking out of there, I said, that's probably not completely false. I probably would legitimately do that. So it's interesting to see how hard some of us push each other and really want to try to get to that next level. But again, how do you handle it? How do you manage it? Obviously, I feel like a lot of us our health sometimes takes a back seat, which isn't good. I haven't been able to go to the gym in a week and a half, and I need to go. I need to be here later. It's like, what's the point of working this hard, making all this money if you can't eventually retire, because you're so out of shape. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're at First Internet Bank and you've been there a little over 2 years. Did you come in with an assistant, or did you get to a certain point and then you had to bring one on? And if so, what was that point?
Yeah, good question. I've been here a little bit over 2 years. No, I didn't have an assistant when I came on. I kind of been asking for one for a little while, and how it is when you're at a department that's growing. It's really difficult to kind of see, okay, when is somebody like this needed? When can they afford it? When I started, I don't know what we did in volume that year, maybe only 50 million or something. And then I think we did 150 this last year. So, going 3 times in 2 years is pretty, big. So I started asking, I want to say the beginning of last year, just saying, hey, I can't get to the next level of volume because I can't handle all of this. And it took a little while, a little bit of, back and forth pushing to try to get them to be okay with it. And then once we got the buy off to be able to do it, it took a little while to get somebody. So I think it's only been about 4 or 5 months now that I've had an assistant. So it took about a year probably to kind of really make it happen. And then now we actually have 2. There's another one that supports like 3 or 4 BDOs.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, because the thing with that too is once the business puts this infrastructure around you, you feel the pressure of I need to produce now, even more so.
Yeah, it's like I've been fighting for this, and then they're like, "Well, you better get going with it."
Right. Well, I love what you said about wanting to kind of find your ceiling, and then when you get there, you need to go find the new ceiling because you've reached the top, and it at some point there is it just doesn't even make sense to do more. I mean, I think that the $50 million producer, I used to be like a unicorn. Now they're out there. It's still top 1% in the country, but they're out there. I know somebody that does 75. I know somebody that does 150. But like the one that did 100 million last year that was on my podcast, he had basically 3 people working with him on his team to get there. So I think kind of the next kind of progression of a BDO, and I don't know how this is going to fit into like the business models of SBA lenders, but you obviously have some sort of secret sauce, right? And so it's like build around that, because then you can also have, the bottom 50% of your sales team doing pretty much nothing, like, struggling to even get to 8 or 10 million. So, but then it puts a lot of power into our hands as top producing BDOs. And then it's like, that's kind of risky for a business model. And then, but for us to do it, we have to want to do it. And then we have to be able to scale. So if you were going to get to 100 million, you think you can do that with the team around you, or would you have to essentially bring in more people and try to scale yourself?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we were talking about at the Coleman event as well. That was something I kind of have kicked around for a long time. Really trying to understand. You get kind of pushback, right? If you look at it and say from an SBA standpoint, a lot of shops have 1 or 2 guys, maybe 3, that are doing the majority of the volume. And then you have other people that are maybe like kind of in the middle, and then some maybe that are trying to get there, right? That model is a little odd to me to try to understand as to why do we do it that way? My kind of philosophy, or the way that I think would make more sense, is if you had just 4 or maybe 5 BDOs total and said, hey, we're going to do 150 to 200 million with just them, but let's put a lot of support around them. It's not to take away from anybody that's doing less than that. Obviously, this is a really hard gig. There's people that take 4 or 5 years to kind of really get going, and then all of a sudden they figure it out, right? You talk a lot about having a niche. Sometimes it takes 4 or 5 years for you to realize what your niche is, and then you hit the gas and take off. So it doesn't mean that all BDOs that are doing less than 12, 15 million aren't good at their job. Maybe they're just not there yet, But to answer your question, I mean, in order to have a team that can get you to that point, it's kind of difficult to figure out exactly what would work, because people have tried it, right? They tried pods with underwriting. They've tried pods with closers. They've tried having 3 or 4 assistants. But at what point do you become like basically the face of kind of your team, where you're bringing in deals and then handing them off to somebody, under you, and having them kind of run with the deal? Then are they really working with you? It's more like
exactly
you're a sales rep. And so that's what's difficult to kind of try to figure out. is how
It's
do
very
you
difficult.
juggle all that? Yeah. Well, and then what you said about the banks getting nervous because they've got their eggs all in one basket. That argument to me doesn't make sense because if you're taking care of that BDO, you're getting the deals done that they like. You've got good credit management. You're paying them what they should be paid. They're not going to go anywhere. As you know, it's hard to leave an institution. Typically, the only reason BDOs leave is because the credit box changed, or they can't get their deals across the finish line because there's not enough closers or something. Otherwise, they don't leave because they're doing too much volume. And the banks should look at that and say, man, this guy is killing it. I got to find a way to lock him down, make sure that he or she never leaves. So I think the whole argument of having 3 or 4 BDOs that are doing 150 million combined. Oh wow, if one leaves, it's kind of like how we look at deals with concentrations, right? It's like I can see where their argument is, but at the end of the day, if you're taking care of those people, they're not going to go anywhere. So it's kind of silly.
It's true, but I think you're thinking about it in the context of yourself, and you're probably a nice guy and everyone probably likes you in there. But there's some top producers that do it not the right way, and it becomes toxic for the organization. And maybe that's part of the fear too.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, I guess if you were going to build a team or you were going to be comfortable having only a few BDOs, you would need to make sure that they kind of fit within the model of what you're looking for.
There's so many things I want to talk to you about. I want to go back to the BDO of the year thing. Who nominated you for that?
I think it was somebody within our organization. I all of a sudden I started getting emails from them saying, hey, I have some questions. What'd you produce last year? And I'm like, what? And they're like, oh, well, we're all nominating. So I think they kind of got together and said, we're gonna go ahead and do this and try to get him nominated.
That's good. It was good PR. So why do you think people? I mean, that's very nice, and it's a great compliment that people. You didn't nominate yourself. People nominated you. Why do you think they did that?
I don't know. I mean, I guess what I kind of hear a lot of is they enjoy working with me. I'm pretty laid back. It is extremely rare for me to get upset with somebody and to the point where I'm raising my voice or kind of expressing my frustration. I kind of look at everybody as if they're working hard and they're putting in effort. There's no reason to yell at people. It just seems silly, I've worked with a lot of BDOs over the years that it's like their main, objective is to push the deal across the line by screaming at people and by just frankly being a jerk. And I've never taken that stance. The way I kind of look at it, and I think I learned it probably from my dad, is if you're pretty calm and you're pretty mellow all the time, and then maybe once or twice a year, you do show some frustration. People are like, oh no, like I really messed up here because he's not always mad, right? You're not crying wolf. We've all worked with the BDOs that are always mad, always screaming, always, ripping people apart. And you kind of get numb to it to where you're like, yeah, whatever, you're mad again, no big deal. Where with me, they're always like, man, you're so nice, you're so easygoing, you're so easy to talk to. I'm willing to kind of work a little extra for you. I'm willing to take something on for you because I enjoy working with you. Compared to somebody else where they're like, oh no, I don't want that file. I don't want to work with that person ever again.
Right.
All they do is scream at me. So I feel like that's part of it. People tend to enjoy working with me just because I'm more easygoing. I try really hard to treat everybody the same and just kind of motivate them and help them. So I'm hoping that's the main reason. That, and then obviously, production, I stay on top of my deals. I work hard. We get stuff done. So yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit of a mix of those two.
Yeah. Well, you're nice. And by the way, so when your dad was mad, there must have been something bad.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's pretty funny because he was usually pretty laid back, and then all of a sudden he'd kind of rip into me, and I'm like, oh no, I guess I really messed up here. But it worked because you knew when you were in trouble, and you knew, for the rest of the time you're pretty good. Whereas with my mom, it was kind of different, where it felt like I was always in trouble with my mom. But when my dad kind of came along, it was like, oh, we're fine. But my dad was actually my principal growing up in school, so we could probably do a full 3-hour,
Wow.
counseling session on that. But
yeah, we'll save that for another time.
All right.
But it goes to credibility too. What I found is some of those kind of bulldog, bulldoze their way through the deals to get to, their 22 million or whatever. You do see that. But the folks that I know that are smashing records, it's almost like the nicer they are, the more they do, which is it kind of tells you something, because it's like, I think selling internally is probably one of the top 3 things a successful BDO does in terms of building relationships internally, establishing credibility and trust internally. And so like, I know someone comes to mind who does like 70 million, 75 million and manages a team, and he's like the nicest guy I've ever met. You're kind of along the same lines, and I also am extremely well liked. And if anyone says otherwise, they're lying. So then you were the top performer last year at your company, right? That's what it says here on my sheet.
Yeah, I was.
What does that look like?
I think I have to go back and look. I think I just did right under 40 million. Had probably 10, 12 million rollover. So I was up there. This year I've already surpassed that. So, hopefully I'll be the top one again. I've got Ryan Kroge always going back and forth with me. So Ryan and I've worked together for probably 5 or 6 years now. And I've beat him every year. So I'm hoping I can beat him again this year. So
I love it.
Yeah, Ryan's awesome. We have a good time when we get together, hang out with each other. So it's pretty fun to kind of push each other a little bit, here and there.
Yeah, a little intercompany rivalry. That fuels me more than the paychecks, more than the whatever. Like, that is, to me, I feel like I have to win.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny because like I am laid back, but I'm extremely competitive. So like as a kid, people didn't want to play games with me because I would get so frustrated if I didn't win. So it's funny. So I have 5-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. I coach my son's flag football team. So it's funny, they're kindergartners. They're all over the place. And I have to kind of tell myself over and over, okay, they're 5, calm down. Because I get so competitive. We've only lost 1 game. We're really good. We've got a great team, a bunch of really good dads working with me. But it's funny because we have to kind of like tone it down a little bit. Sometimes I'll get frustrated with the ref or something, and I'm like, oh, they're 5. This isn't my game. I'm not playing right now. I'm not back in high school playing football. I got to calm down. But
that's funny.
Yeah, being competitive is obviously one of the things you probably look at with all the top BDOs. We're all extremely competitive. Yes. I hate seeing people do more volume than me. I can't stand when I lose a deal to someone else. I'm always trying to push to be better. And you get even when looking at like LinkedIn, right? People are posting, oh, I closed this, I closed that. Sometimes I'm kind of looking at it and I'm like, okay, but what have you done for the year? Where are you at? I have this like desire to be better than them, at the end of the day. So it's funny you mentioned that, because although we do get paid well and we are helping people kind of achieve their dreams, we still want to be better than someone else. So that's usually probably something you'll find with all of them.
It's a little healthy competition is, I think, good. But that's funny. And you're in the Dallas market, right? And I'm seeing a lot of similarities. Sometimes I interview people that I've never met, and I'm just like seeing, it's like, and I just want to get inside the mind. Like you've been a top producer you got into SBA, 06, cutting your teeth on 504 stuff?
Yeah, I think it was, I can never remember if it was like '06 or '07. It feels so long ago. And I guess it kind of really was. Yeah, I started on the CDC side. Before that, I was in college. I worked for Sprint, the wireless company, and sold cell phones. I managed a store here and there. And then, but at the end of the day, I was just selling phones and trying to get done with college. One of my professors said, "Hey, I know this guy. They're a small business lender. They're looking for a salesperson. I think you would be good. Do you want to interview with them?" I said, "Sure." I don't really know what I'm doing. I had like 2 classes left, and I didn't know what I was doing with my life. I just, wanted to make money, and so I went and interviewed with him, and it was kind of funny. So he sat down and he said, "So what do you want to do when you graduate college?" And I said, "I don't know. I just want to make a lot of money." And he said, "How much is a lot of money?" I said, "If I made like 500 grand, that would be a good start." And he kind of like slammed his like notebook down on the desk, and he's a big guy, right? And kind of like leaned over and said, "What is wrong with your generation?" And I'm like, what did I do? I kind of got a little scared. And he goes, "I've interviewed, I don't know, 50, 60 people. And I ask them, what do you want to do? What is something that, you're looking for when you get done with college?" And every single one of them says, "I want good health insurance, a secure job, blah, blah, blah." And he said, "You're the first one to come in here and say you wanted to make money, and not only make money, you wanted to make a good amount of money." And I said, "Well, I guess I'm just different than everybody else. Like I didn't grow up with a lot, and I want to, make sure that I'm able to provide and I don't have to worry about it." And he said, "Okay." And that was it. He stood up and said, "Well, let's go introduce you to the staff and see, I can kind of explain to you what we do." And I'm like, I have no idea what a 504 loan is. I have no idea what, SBA was. But I kind of went through, and one of the underwriters, I actually knew who he was. So he had worked at Best Buy where I sold cell phones. And so it was kind of funny. He said, "Hey, how you doing?" And he had been there for maybe
Wow.
2 years. Still one of my best friends, taught me a lot about credit, ended up working with him for probably 10 years. And so it was kind of interesting. And so he gave me kind of like a brief idea of what they do. And I still kind of had no idea. And so I left. I talked to one of my friend's moms that worked at Wells, and I said, "Hey, I have this position here." And she kind of said, "Oh, if you can basically skip coming up through the banking side of any of that, take the job." And I said, "Okay." So I called him back and I jokingly said, "So do you have health insurance?" And then he kind of laughed, and he was just like, "Oh man, that was good." He's like, "I'll see you in 2 weeks," and then just hung up on me. And then
That's
I showed up,
awesome.
and yeah, so it was a good opportunity. I learned a lot there. Then went on to another CDC. Did quite a bit of volume there. It was kind of in obviously the big real estate boom. I had no clue that that it was gonna all just come crashing down, a couple years later, but still learned quite a bit, as far as the SBA side, and then eventually was able to switch over to doing the 7A.
You
And
went to
I,
US Bank, right?
yeah, yeah. So when the market basically crashed, US Bank was acquiring a lot of the banks that were failing. They had a lot of cash, very secure bank. They didn't have a small business department at all, really, in Southern California. So I ended up going there, working with them. They provided amazing credit training, probably some of the best training you can get. So that really helped my career as far as kind of actually learning the credit side. Because when you're on the CDC side, yeah, you need to know the SBA guidelines, you need to know the SOP, and maybe a little bit of it. But back then, it was a lot of like playing golf, taking people to lunch. Like I was trying to get banks to send me business, and I was good at that part, but I wasn't good at completely understanding what I was doing, what I was looking at from a credit standpoint. So US Bank gave me some really good credit training. Actually did conventional lending for maybe a year, but it was primarily just investment properties, and then switched back to SBA, and then haven't left since then. So I always say it's kind of funny. I think since leaving the CDC side, I've probably closed like 4 504s total. Just got stuck doing 7As. And then once I realized I really enjoyed business acquisitions, then that was pretty much my whole focus. So I would say for the last 10, 11 years, pretty much all I've done is business acquisitions. And then I'll do some startup franchise stuff if it's really strong. And then, of course, I'm not going to turn away a real estate deal if it lands in my lap. But for the most part, what I go after are business acquisitions.
And you were there at US Bank during some of the roughest period of, I mean, were you guys even lending at that point? Like, what's it like being in a sales role in that period?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, as you know, US Bank's pretty conservative already. So it was real tough at that point because there wasn't a lot of deals. I feel like I would look at, if I had to guess, 80, $90 million in applications, and I probably would do 20 million. And so it was tough. Like, you're constantly telling people no. It was definitely a rough period. We're still getting stuff done. But it definitely wasn't how it is now or how it's been the last, 7, 8 years. It was a rough time.
Somebody wrote you a letter, you and the banker at US Bank, like a 5-page letter thanking you guys for helping him. Does this ring a bell?
That was a tough deal. They were a construction company, had actually switched they used to build decks and docks up in Lake Arrowhead in California. And they switched and started doing full construction. And then they actually hired a CFO to come on that really knew what he was doing and got him into kind of the equipment maintenance side. And they were doing a lot of equipment maintenance, and they were growing quickly and kind of needed some working capital. They needed a line. They needed to refinance some debt, and we were able to kind of get in there and work with them. But it was a lot of it was a long process, and it was a lot of work. So
when they were very thankful at the end.
Yeah, and I actually still talk to that CFO every now and then. It's funny, he'll kind of call me to say hi and just, hey, how you been? How's it going? It was pretty interesting. He's probably one of the few borrowers that I've kept in touch with over the years.
I think you made an incredible impact on them, and that's why. I could tell by the way they wrote the letter, and it was just you guys helping when others wouldn't, and you got it done. What did that experience and similar types of experience, what does that teach you about the craft?
Yeah, I think it's funny. I right before this podcast, I was sending an email back to a borrower. I really need to get better at, and maybe I'll ask you this question. Okay, so when you close a deal, do you do anything for the borrower? Obviously, we pay broker fees most of the time with the broker or anything. Do you do anything for them?
Not the borrower. Broker fee, and then if I'm not paying a fee to a broker or a referral source, I'll send them something.
Okay. Yeah, and I think that's something that I've kind of kicked around in my head. You have like the real estate agents, they're always like, here's your closing gift or whatever. I feel like maybe as a good BDO, we should be doing something for the borrower. I try usually to at least call them or send them an email like a week later and just say, hey, how you doing? I gave you a minute to breathe. Like, thanks for sticking with us and getting this deal done or whatever. But that's something I think I need to work on of getting a little better. Well, I had a borrower, so I closed 3 deals while I was out the end of last week. And one of them, the borrower emailed me, the closer, my assistant, and I think the underwriter, and basically broke down each one of them, thanking them for
awesome.
Getting the deal done. Yeah, and it was cool. And I'm like, that doesn't happen very often. A lot of times we close a loan, I tell them thanks, and then they just kind of go away. And but it is really great when you get those. So I was responding back to him, and I probably worked with that guy for over a year. And he had bought. So originally I looked at it, he was buying a UPS store. He decided to pay cash for the first one. And then he said, hey, I found another one I want to do. So I kind of kept in touch with him for about a year and we got it done. So he was just saying, thanks for sticking it out with me. But it is funny how you you kind of lose sight sometimes of exactly what we're doing because we do so much at one time where we're getting deals done. And that's what I emailed them back. I said, hey, thanks for giving me, a chance to like stop for a second and like reflect on this was a full year, process. And although to me, during that year, I probably talked to, I don't know, 150 different borrowers. Like he realized, thank you for sticking with me. That for him, it was a bigger deal, right? And I feel like that's something that we kind of tend to lose sight of the more volume we do. We're not sitting on one or two deals at a time. We're on 30, 40 deals at a time. So we're not really focused on that one borrower and kind of the impact we're making on their lives. And I think that's something that we lose a little sight of. And I probably need to get better at realizing, at the end of the day, it is really cool what we do.
No, you're absolutely right. And it's just, we're busy, right? We'd love to do this, but we're busy. And it's just a matter of doing it, right? Like
Right.
There was a period where I did send a couple of these out, where I would send a thank you package. And I think it's more so the thought behind what you're doing versus the actual gift or how much it costs. Cause I would write a handwritten note. I put a book that I liked from a small business owner about resourcefulness. I put that in there and some, merch or whatever, and then I mail it. But I was doing it all manually, and then, I got busy and then I stopped. But implementing something like that would be cool. But the other thing that's cool is, and I think this is easier, and I think people do this, but kind of getting the testimonial after gives you an opportunity, kind of forces you to go back and talk to the borrower. And I just started a second podcast where I'm interviewing small business owners who've been through the SBA process. And so I did a couple of my borrowers, and it's like, okay, we're 1 month after acquisition and I'm asking how it's going. I wouldn't normally do that in my day-to-day. So that's been helping me too, just kind of keep that relationship going post-close.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a great idea. I've been working on a podcast for a little while as well. I just haven't been able to finish up. I'm trying to get like 10 recordings going first, but we're going to talk about
Nice.
Before buying and selling a business. So you can talk to buyers and then sellers, and then of course like the brokers and everything. Just trying to give some information on buying businesses. There's not a lot of information out there, and there's so much,
Yep.
not even being specific to SBA. Just really trying to give people some content so they understand, the process of buying and selling a business. So yeah, that's awesome. I'll have to have you come on and talk with me. Then I can interview you.
You're going to be surprised how powerful the podcast is.
Cool.
You're one of the top BDOs every year at US Bank, top 10 every year. You're number 2, 1 year, which there's a lot of BDOs at a big bank. So that's meaningful. Then your top performer, just going down your resume, you're a top performer. What are you doing to generate these results? What are you doing differently than others that has you kind of rising above the rest? What are you doing right?
Yeah, I think it goes back to a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, just kind of having the right attitude. I think at the end of the day, like, I don't get nervous talking to people. I kind of like feel like there's a little bit of like confidence there that works. So, just at the end of the day, like being able to actually work, right? Like you get a lot of BDOs that are like, man, I wish I could do that kind of volume. And I'm like, well, what are you doing on a day-to-day basis? Like I follow you on Instagram. I see you sitting on the beach at 3 p.m. Like, come on, like you want to get there, but you don't. But I think a lot of them are scared to put themselves out there. They're scared to pick up the phone and cold call. They're scared to go to an event. They're scared to like continually following up. And I feel like having some confidence of not being scared to do all of those things has put me in a good position where, I'm constantly trying to bring in new referral sources, bring in new deals, try to get directly to someone who's buying a business rather than waiting for the selling broker to reach out to me. But at the end of the day, I feel like just having the confidence and being able to kind of like just push myself to work and having that work ethic is really what sets you apart. yeah, people enjoy working with me, and they enjoy that I am nice and laid back, and I'm knowledgeable. But I wouldn't be able to get to those people if I didn't push myself to do it and have the confidence to do it myself already.
Well, Jared, I appreciate you coming on the podcast, man. This was a really fun conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, that's it for this week. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode of The Art of SBA Lending. And if you have any feedback or suggestions, email me at ray@artofsba.com. Until next time, ta-ta.